I think we also should leave the floor here to the audience, and please try to be as concise, precise as possible in your questions, and the floor is yours.
Hi, my name is Michael. I unfortunately have a very general question. Why is it always about Muslims? There are millions and millions of migrants in Europe that are not Muslim. You never hear about them. There is never integration problem. There is never demands of society of separate bathing time, separate this, separate that. There is never... Me myself have immigrant background, and I am not blonde. They address me in English when I fly domestic. I don't feel, anything bad about that. So why is it always about Muslims? Why do all the Buddhists, the Hindus, the Sikhs in the UK, why don't they have the same problems? Are they more welcome than the Muslims?
I have one answer to that question, if you'd like to hear it. Yeah, I think it's, again, one of the points that I mentioned, it's partly to do with media representation for a start, certainly in the UK. It's to do with the fact that that there is in existence, but there is also in a mediated form, in a form that shapes public consciousness and understanding of Islam as a global threatening force. Right? So that there is this tendency to draw circles around the Muslim community, and they come, identities of community identities are imaginary constructs, right? It's a good Benedict Anderson tells us this, right? And so they get imagined and passed around in that imaginary form through discourse, through media representations. If whatever you see, if there are terror attacks, for example, in Britain, right? So they then get reported. And then the next news story is about a mosque in the town of Luton, near to where I live, which is seen as the kind of hotbed of Salafi radicalism in the UK. And then all of a sudden, public discourse starts to join these dots together, and the problems to do with integration are underpinned by an ideology that you can name, and it is Islam, right? Like it has an agency, it's this force. Right? And it's partly to do, I think, with the effects of media representation. I don't think they are necessarily better integrated. Well, yeah. Yeah, but not... Yeah, but that's not true. That's well, what I would say is, my first answer to that would be, it's not just Muslims, because the Afro-Caribbean community have similar representation in crime figures in all of these areas. So if you're trying to say that there is something special about Muslims, or perceived to be something special about Muslims that puts them in this category of the unintegrated, then there are other communities who are also non-integrated. So yes, well, there are all kinds of communities that are not integrated. The Somali community, for example. Not necessarily. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. That's a rather monological view of integration.
I can address that by a very concrete sociological example, by mentioning a study that has been done on Somali minority in Sweden, and specifically in Stockholm, and a same type of group in the United States, in Minnesota. They came at the same time, they immigrated to the United States and to Sweden at the same time from the same area from southern Somalia in 91. 10 years later, the study is done to see how the community has succeeded integrating in American society, Minnesota, Minneapolis, and Stockholm. Somalis that came from the same area in the same time, imagine that. They are trying to see economically, education-wise, how does this community in Minnesota fare in comparison to the Stockholm one. 99% of Somalis, adults of course, are employed, self-employed. The companies they have reached the middle-class status in Minnesota.
That is not true. That is not true. They have extreme problems with Somalis in Minnesota. You can read it as well. They have IS fighters from Somali communities in Minnesota, and also they have problems with gang fighting, both Canada and the United States. A lot of Somali gang fightings and Somalis killing each other in the drug trade. So that's a myth that the Somalis are succeeding so much. I read about this subject as well. So it's just a myth that you bring on here. And you can check it. Everything is available on the internet. You can read all the news.
We should not trust everything that's on the internet. That's why we have universities also in our society.
Yes,
so,
I studied at university as well.
Okay, so yeah, next question.
Yes. Thank you very much for this stimulating debate. It takes me back both to history and what you said, Professor Amanpour. Is that so? Oh. The word anti-Semitism was created by a German philosopher. It was to designate the Jews that were living in Germany. Today, maybe we have to rethink this term because all the immigrants are coming from the Middle East. They are all Semites. So when you tell a Syrian or a Palestinian or so they are anti-Semite, they look at you because they are Semites themselves. But this is not common knowledge. What happens, as you said, if they come and they have big Christian, Baha'i, Muslim, etc., they are all put in one bag. It is not so strange. What society looks at now when they see different people, different faces, and they come from conflict areas, of course they look at them with big eyes because they want to see how will they fit in. And how is their loyalty to the state where they are going to live? Will they have a foot in Turkey and vote for Erdogan, or will they vote for the German politicians? It is the same in Sweden, it is everywhere. And I think the loyalty issue must be there. When you accept to come to live in another country, you also have a responsibility to think twice. You cannot only demand that where you get to are supposed to accept you as you are. You have to accept them as well. This is the discourse must be reciprocal, because these people who have the wisdom to leave their country, to look for a better life somewhere else, they are not dummies. They know exactly what they want. They go through storms and winds and everything to reach Europe because they want a better life. In that respect, they are welcome, but they have to show some loyalty and some ingredients, willing to contribute, willing to share, and make themselves understood that they also have in their luggage a cultural wealth that they would like to show. Thank you. I represent the Europe-Med Civil Platform, all the European Mediterranean countries. Thank you.
I see. Thank you very much. Well, actually, I think it's, well, there is a definition of anti-Semitism, and it's not that simple to say that since I'm a Semite myself, since I'm from Arab origin, I cannot be an anti-Semite. I cannot have anti-Semitic attitudes. You can be a Semite and having anti-Semite attitudes at the same time. This is very, very easy and very possible. You see that all the time. So. No, I mean, then we. Well, still, no. You can still be Semite and have an anti-Semitic worldview, and part of that is being anti-Zionist, of course.
Yes. But
yes.
it is.
No, but it's not.
It's a contradiction.
This answer. No, it's not a contradiction because this answer is actually too easy.
I'm sorry to say, the Iranians do not consider themselves Arabs, and they propagate everywhere they are that they are better than the Arabs. They are superior. They are Aryans. You remember that it is your history. I know exactly what the Middle Eastern talk, and anti-Zionism is very spread, and it has to do with the conflict, with other things. And
Sure.
the medias represent something else. I'm answering your question in the beginning, why everybody has no identity, they mix everybody in the same bag. I'm telling you that it is time that we see the people as they are. We call the cat, the tiger, etc. We have names for all this.
Well, but it's a loophole just to say I'm not anti-Jewish, I'm only anti-Israel, I'm only anti-Zionism. I mean, it comes all together. It's one package. So it's very easy to say, since I'm Arab, I can't be an anti-Semite. You can very easily be. Lots of people have proven that over history. But I think, well, in generally, in main terms, we don't disagree so totally. Well, that doesn't matter. There are lots of things that they don't translate but still do. So I don't think so. And on the other hand, your second point was loyalty, to show loyalty. Well, this is a very difficult matter as well. How do you want someone to show loyalty, and when doesn't he show loyalty, and why is it not possible to show loyalty to two countries or to two nationhoods, to two states? People do have hyphenated identities, and they are doing pretty well with those hyphenated identities. I'm very proud of my hyphenated identity. I can be very Iranian and I'm very German at the same time. My problem only starts when the German soccer team and the Iranian soccer team, play against each other. Then I really have a very big identity crisis. Not so big, because usually I'm with the possible loser, which is Iran always. So, but this is the problem that really emerges, and when you have a problem with your double identity. But I guess that most people, we have this talk in Germany which they say that it's so difficult, man sitzt zwischen den Stühlen. This is what you always say about these kids like me from German mother, Iranian father, Arab father, German mother stuff. Wait, they don't know where they belong to. They have a real identity problem. I don't think that people need to have this problem. You can very easily pick the best stuff of all these two cultures and be very happy about it. You can be very happy to have New Year's feast twice a year. We have it on the 21st of March and again on the 31st of December. And it's really not an identity problem if you tell your kids you do that twice a year. So you can, that's what I believe in, and this is what all these recent empirical studies do. We have a center in Berlin for that who are doing studies on hyphenated identities. You can live with it and you can be proud of it, and it doesn't need to be a problem. Unless someone tells you, you must show your loyalty, you must decide where you belong to. You must either be loyal to Germany or you must either be loyal to Syria.
So, our questions?
My name is Niklas Kellerman. I am an ethnologist and I working for gender equality, and I work with men and gender equality issues. I would like to thank first to the director of this institute, because he was very kind and helped us I represent also the Network Against Honor-Related Violence, that we, a few months ago in November, asked or invited Seyran Ateş from Berlin here, and together we had this first conference here. And I discovered, and I'm very grateful, I discovered in the Goethe-Institut at a higher level of freedom of expression and freedom of speech than outside of this building. Since 20 years ago, I work with the integration policy and especially focus on human rights. I don't care about British values, I don't care about Swedish values or German values, I care about human rights. And this is the problem. When Seyran Ateş was here, she had 7 bodyguards because she was threatened of her own brothers, because she had a mosque there she welcomed homosexuals and welcomes women and men together, and they were praying together. We have problems when she mentioned the Islamic conference in Germany. Seyran Ateş mentioned that those conservative priests, or they put the demand on Angela Merkel, if you invite this lady or this woman, Seyran Ateş, then we are not here. And Angela Merkel gave up. She didn't invite her, the feminist Muslim, but she invited the others, the majority of the conservative Islamic representatives. What's the trouble with Islam? You know, I guess you have read the book of Mona El-Tahawi, What is the Trouble with Islam? Or you read the book from Seyran Ateş, Islam Needs a Sexual Revolution. I would like to take it very short in 2 minutes. First, a private level and in a general level. On a private level, I have a lady from Iran originally. She came here 20 years ago. She was very happy to receive this country and be free, and she threw away her hijab. But her husband was not very happy. Her husband forbid it for her, and she resisted. It went so long that she wanted to divorce. It crossed his honor. He exposed her for an acid attack that she bears the responsibility. She almost died. She bears the responsibility for all her life. It was 20 years ago. I am just coming from a book release. It is this book. She wrote a book. She's sitting here beside me. This is on the individual level, who is the good or bad Muslim. On the group level, I work with those organizations, ethnic organizations, who are keeping their cultures and making islands in these countries, small islands that we call enclaves. I am sorry, but I have never met one single person who said, I come here because I want to be Swede. I would like to be Swedish. For my part, I am also an immigrant. I would never dream in my dreams that I want to be Swede. I'm not interested in these things. It is the problem for the second or the third generation. My problem is that there are islands in this country, in Germany, in England, that people are not interested in becoming in English or becoming Germans or becoming Swedes. They are interested to keep their cultures and keep their values also. And the values, it is not British values, it is not German or Swedish values, or whatever values. It is contra human rights. We have the problem with virginity controls in this country. According to the science, according to the official statistic, we have over 100,000 girls who are living under virginity control. I would like to know how many in Germany. Nestle Kelek or Seyran Ateş says very, very serious things. We have terrible problem with gender apartheid. We have terrible problem with anti-homosexuality. We have terrible problem with the hatred of West and the hatred of so-called Swedish values, which has nothing to do with Sweden. Sweden didn't invented gender equality and human rights. It was written in 1948, the United Nations. A girl should have the right to her own body, to her own sexuality. It is completely denied and completely rejected, openly rejected. So I sympathize with you when you say that we have a problem that society excludes us. But let's have the other side of the coin. We have a problem when big and bigger immigrant groups are excluding the values of human rights. So my question is, what do you think about Professor Bassam Tibi, who maintains in Germany that Europe is not able to defend their own values? And then I don't mean European values, I mean human rights. Thank you.
That was a question to me especially, right? Did I get it that way? Well, first of all, Sedan Ateş and Necla Kelek were part of the Islam conference of Schäuble. So they were in there, just... Well, yes, because they decided to generally change the membership of the second conference, but it's not that their voices were not heard. So their voices were actually heard, and they are still very much part of the German discourse. But I'm with you. I'm totally with you that it's totally unacceptable that Seyhan Ateş needs 7 bodyguards wherever she shows up, and that Muslim community is not able to accept her point of view, which is a very liberal one and which is a necessary one. What she is doing to open up a mosque in Berlin, a liberal mosque where homosexual people, transsexual people are welcome, is a very necessary step, and it's very important for the Muslim community. Although it was from Egypt that those threats came, it was not from Germany. Maybe one should add that too. So obviously this message spread to Egypt, and it was a fatwa from Egypt, which caused this whole trouble and which made all these guides and stuff necessary. Because in Germany she is rejected by the majority of the Muslim, obviously, who don't agree to what she is doing and what she wants, but she is still part of the discourse, and she is a very loud voice of the discourse. And there are, even among those conservative communities in Germany, very many people who say that it's important that also this sort of a voice does exist. So this too is part of a picture, actually. Well, when it comes to Bassam Tibi, I'm not that pessimistic about this whole thing. And this is what I wanted to stress before too. I think it's absolutely naive to think that there aren't problems occurring when we have large minorities that are to be integrated in a society. Minorities which come from a very different background. So of course there are problems, and all the problems you spoke about, whether these are really Islamic problems or not is another topic, or whether it's just about patriarchy, which shows itself. But for one thing, I think it's not the majority of Muslims who would like to live on those islands, in those islands, and who do reject the democratic values of Sweden or of Germany. It's really not the majority. But still this minority exists. And well, then it's a problem we have to deal with. We have to talk about it, we have to face it, but we won't be able to deal with it, and we cannot face it if we just tell these people, you don't belong to us, you're not part of our society. I mean, these people are Germans, for example. Most of the people who cause the biggest problems in Germany when it comes to Salafism, when it comes to patriarchy, when it comes to all the problems you were just mentioning, these kids are Germans. So we have to deal with them as our own citizens, and not as some foreign stuff, as some aliens, as it's a homegrown problem, and we should deal with it. And it doesn't help just as saying that this comes from Islam, this comes from somewhere else, this comes from the Near Far East or whatever. But, well... It's a problem to deal with.
I'm very glad that you raised the issue of human rights, because human rights are not just only part of the value community of Europe. It is everyone's rights all around the world. So that's the whole function of human rights. It belongs to everyone. Yes, and it's also, if you look upon Germany, the German constitution is permitted by this human rights thinking. And it's very easy to read and see that how it was influenced by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So in that sense, it's very clear what the moral baseline should be in a society like Germany.
Is that the case? Would everybody say that?
So,
Well, some people say that German integration policy too is a complete failure. I wouldn't subscribe to this point of view, actually. I still think, and I still think that we are doing pretty well, actually, in Germany. Although there are backlashes, although there are problems, although there's lots of stuff to discuss, but you cannot say about this whole policy of integration, of all the discussion, that it was a complete failure. Not at all. And sorry? Yeah, but that too had a different context, yeah, when she said that. She didn't say that her whole integration policy was a complete failure, and she still sticks to what German politics are doing. And this is what I just mentioned. I think that Germany is really doing good in terms of policy. What they did with this when they were trying to establish theology at the universities, what sort of rights they were giving to Muslims, and I do think that it really pays back. And that they are, well, in terms of how Muslims in Germany really subscribe to the German constitution and stuff. Still, there is this percentage of people who don't. There is the percentage of youngsters who go, still want to fight for the IS, of the Salafis, and all these people where you really don't understand how is it possible that a young girl who is German, who converts not into Islam, but who converts to Salafism, a 16-year-old girl, who has all the chances, all the opportunities that Germany offers. Why does she want to wear a total hijab, a burqa, and want to be married to someone who is fighting in Syria? You cannot understand it. You have this phenomenon still. But, well, it's still the minority examples. And if you look at Germany, what has happened there and how Muslims are integrated, if you, for example, look at the criminal statistics, they actually are pretty good in Germany. It's not that Muslims have such a higher percentage of them statistics in Germany. How much they want to adopt German citizenship, how much and confidence they have into German institutions. I'm still optimistic.
Well, time we are now approaching the end soon here, and I wonder, the other panelists here, James and Emin, do you want to add anything?
Yes, I thank you so much, Katayun, because we need to. Right, we need to raise our bar higher than the argument. The TV said it, so it must be true. That's a Homer Simpson argument, basically. So we need to kind of rise above that and really utilize the studies which have empirically sound and done by academics and professionals in this. So I would like to stress that in the age that we are finding ourselves in, where really the knowledge is in the stasis of inflation. Basically, there's no real value in in the general public, oftentimes, I would not generalize and say that's the case in all cases, but we need to really stress the point and go to the experts which are doing the empirical studies. And that's why, I mean, I suppose we are invited here and not really invited in a public discourse where we have polemics and say, look, my argument is better than yours. So I think in the age of fake news, in the age of where everything is questions and conspiracy theories, we need to rise above that and try to be very critical of the sources that we are, of the news that we are receiving, basically. That I would like to stress that very much, and I do that to my students as well. And we teach, textual criticism, critical thinking, based on the premise that you need to find out facts as much as possible to your best ability, and to base your arguments and your opinions or your decisions primarily based on empirical studies, on science, and so on and so forth. So I would like to finish with that, basically. And I agree with whatever you said before, because I think I'm in that, and we have never met before. So it's quite strange that we kind of agree on certain issues without meeting. So that means that science has something to tell us, even though if it's a social science.
From a historical point of view, one of the things that I become suspicious of is grand narratives which tell stories about why things happen. Right. So I'm aware of the islands that you talk about very, very keenly, and I'm aware of the non-integrated or problematically or only partially integrated minorities that you talk about. But I'm just, and I'm aware that many of those communities are connected with, are Muslim or are connected with Islamic traditions. I'm just very suspicious of the fact that as soon as we start to think like that, that it's very easy for certain mindsets to attribute the reasons for the failures of integration to some nebulous notion of Islam, and that then imprints itself back onto the mainstream Muslim communities who are the exceptions to some of the islands. They are not living on the islands, right? So I'm worried about that feedback process that happens within media representation. And the other thing that I'm concerned, it doesn't mean we should not talk about these things that you're talking about, or that we should deny them, right? Or that we have some kind of agenda which, under the flag of fighting Islamophobia, should somehow deny that these problems are in existence. And I don't think any of us would do that. I certainly wouldn't. The other thing which I'm in my work, in my working life, I'm aware of is the importance of building on traditions emerging from Muslim communities, and engaging with Muslim voices, so that those voices are part of the dialogue which tries to find the difficult solutions to the problems that you've talked about. Otherwise, you just find yourself lapsing back into this kind of binary structure which says the rest of society says it's your problem that you're not integrated. Right? So there are many people who are integrated. Yeah, I'm sitting next to two people who are very integrated in all kinds of ways. So they are not necessarily the exceptions, right? They are living examples as are the non-integrated or the problematically integrated communities. And it's important to have a polyphonic discourse, a discourse of many voices talking, some of whom are part of the communities who are being ostensibly labeled as the problem.
I talk extensively.
So thank you very much to all of you. It was a great panel. I think we had a very fruitful discussion here, and I also want to thank the audience for coming and listening and raising interesting questions. So thank you very much for coming. Thanks.